What's up guys, C-Threep here, and I'm going to be showing you how to mix a song from start to finish, and it will be a very concise, condensed version of that, because obviously I don't want to spend forever, but we're just going to go over some of the basics of what to do after you record a song. You've got this daunting task of what in the world do you even do besides just adjust the volumes and pan stuff left and right. Like, is there anything beyond that? Yes, of course there is, and we're going to go over some very basic effects that I'll use that are pretty much, effects that you'll use in every song that you mix, and then we'll briefly talk about mastering. And this video is a response to a lot of your feedback that you gave me in the video that I was asking for just general ideas of what you guys would like to see on my channel. A lot of people did want to see something similar to this. I do plan on making a series out of this and even posting videos where I provide a link where you can go and download the individual instruments to a song and mix it yourself and watch my video and see how I mixed it. And so that, I think, will just be kind of a cool way for you guys and me as well to all learn together. So anyway, let's dive in. Here's a song that my wife and I recorded given the holiday time of year. Here is the song.
In the meadow we can build a snowman and pretend that he's a circus clown. We'll have lots of fun with Mr. Snowman.
Okay, so it's got kind of like a vintage, kind of like 50s feel to it, which is the feel that I was going for with this song. This is all mixed and mastered and everything. So this is the final product. But let's go to the original before any editing or mixing. Well, I have done editing. Okay, so there's 3 steps. Once you've recorded, what in the world do you do? There's an editing phase, a mixing phase, and a mastering phase. Editing phase is simple. Sometimes you use editing and mixing interchangeably. I do, and it's a fault of mine. They are different. First of all, editing, it's simply shifting the tracks around, lining them up with your metronome, cropping stuff out, fading stuff in, fading out, reducing the volume on the vocal track where there's, pauses. You don't want, unwanted noise there. So for example, with like lining stuff up, I've got the metronome here on the top track. I've got my tambourine here on the offbeat to kind of, add that little bit of percussion. And for the most part, it's lined up pretty well, you can see, with the metronome. I mean, it's barely off, but I don't care if it's exact. I kind of like it to be, a simplistic, not so perfect feel. But there were some parts that were off enough that I wanted to crop it and adjust it just a little bit. So that's what I've done in this instance and a few other instances. So that's the editing phase, is basic preparing yourself for the mixing. Now the mixing phase, this is where you are going to spend the bulk of your time. And without, being overwhelmed by what in the world you actually do, I'm just going to go over 3 basic effects that you'll use pretty much every time you mix a song. And once you really learn these effects well, you'll be doing all right. And I'll admit, I am not a pro at all 3 of these effects. I'm every day, whenever I mix a song, I'm learning more and more by trial and error. But anyway, let's dive into it. I'm going to be vague on some of these things just for the sake of time, but just to give you a general idea. So before we get into the effects, in our mixing phase, we do want to make sure the volumes of each of the tracks sound about right. So I'm going to adjust some of the volumes, pan some of the instruments left and right, and by pan, I mean just shift where you hear the track, either into your left headphones or your right headphones. That's what panning is. So let's just hear the straight up recordings after the editing phase. Okay, so obviously the tambourine is pretty loud. You can't really hear the mandolin very loud. So we just need to adjust some of these volumes. So I'm going to press play and just start adjusting the volumes and get it to kind of a ballpark of where I want it to be. It's subject to change later on. As I add effects and stuff, I'm going to have to readjust, but for now we just need a general idea. So here's the tambourine track that I'll adjust. Okay, and what's helpful in this part is I'm also going to start panning. This knob right here is panning it left or right. So I want to get a better idea of how loud to make things by panning the instruments that I want left or right. Okay, this is really rough. That took me 30 seconds to just get the panning and the gain generally where I want it. Now for the effects, they're simple. Again, 3 effects. We're going to use equalization or EQ. Then we're going to use compression and then a little bit of reverb. Those 3 effects go a long ways. There's a lot of songs out there that pretty much only use those effects. Anything else beyond that is, superfluous. It's definitely adding to the song, but maybe not necessary for the core sound of the song. So what is EQ? I, for a long time, like in high school, when I was in a high school band and we were recording some demos and stuff for fun, seriously had no idea that, I knew reverb was a thing, but that's about it. EQ is a super important effect that helps all the instruments blend together. It adjusts the frequency of each individual instrument. You can cut out some frequencies, you can raise the volume of some frequencies just to make it all blend together. So let's play the song and look at what frequencies are being played right now. Got low frequencies here. Notice when the tambourine is hit these high frequencies at like 10,000 kilohertz or 10,000 hertz. Notice these spike every time the tambourine is hit. See, so all these instruments are competing for these frequencies. And with EQ, my goal is to allow certain instruments to shine through where they need to shine and drop the volumes of the areas where they really don't need to be heard. So for a lot of instruments, that is going to be the low end of the frequency spectrum. Pretty much all instruments, unless it's like a maybe acoustic guitar or a bass guitar, of course, a kick drum, we're going to want to leave the low frequencies in those, but the rest of them, we're going to shave off a lot of those low frequencies. Whoa, hey, and now I'm wearing a gray shirt. Actually, my screen recording software stopped working for a little while there, and I did not realize, so I've already made this part, but I will make it again. So to illustrate how EQ works, I have my mandolin track here. We're going to listen to it, and as you listen, try to pay attention to the sound that the guitar pick is making on the strings of the mandolin. It's a very low, like feathery, annoying sound. So try to separate in your mind the sound of the actual note and then the sound of the pick. And there is a blatantly obvious blemish to the song here. And imagine if all the instruments had this sound in there, how that would just make the mix as a whole sound really muddy and kind of make everything a lot less clear. So one of the main purposes of EQ is to get rid of that. Of course, there's a lot more elements to it, like cutting out some other frequencies. Each instrument's going to have its own way that you EQ it. especially depending on the microphone you're using and the room you're recording in, and there's a ton of factors. But to illustrate one simple point here, we're going to use EQ and get rid of that low, rumbly sound. So I'm going to in my program it's called parametric equalizer. It might be called equalization or EQ in your programs. And this is what it looks like. It's a graph. Starting on the left-hand side, we've got lower frequencies, like the ones that I was just talking about. So the first third of this graph is low frequencies. The middle third is kind of your mid-range frequencies, and the upper third is more of the high, shimmering, exciting sounding, clarity sounding frequencies. And to well, let's just listen. I'm going to apply EQ gradually as the track plays, and you'll hear these low sounds being cut out as we go. Okay, see how it got super thin sounding as I got rid of a lot of these frequencies here? I obviously don't want to get rid of that much. I'll probably keep it somewhere around here. And just to help you understand this graph, if you look at the blue line, anywhere where the blue line is touching is how loud the frequency is at that point. So let's say 200 hertz, go up to the blue line, it is at negative 20 decibels, meaning it's 20 decibels quieter at this point. So any sound on this track that is at 200 hertz or that really low frequency is 20 decibels quieter than it used to be. Anything over here where the blue line isn't even existing anymore, those frequencies are just gone. It totally eliminated those. So that's a kind of a basic illustration of how EQ works. So let's listen back to our track and find where I want this to be at. Okay, so I like to go until I notice that it's cutting out a little too much, and then I just back it off a bit. So imagine now us doing that to all of the instruments in this song. Like, that would make a big difference, getting rid of a lot of the muddy sounds. And then not only doing that, but taking time to do other little tweaks here and there, which with vocals, for example, there's a lot of different things that you can do to get rid of some of the, like, the nasally sound from singing. You can boost some of the higher frequencies around 8,000 hertz or so, 10,000 hertz, to get just a little bit more clarity, a little more breathy sound. So that's EQ. Awesome effect, something that you should start experimenting with and start learning the basics. I am going to be posting a video later on that goes into more detail than this. This was just kind of scratching the surface to give you a general idea of what EQ actually is. Now, the second effect that we're going to talk about real quickly is compression. What is compression? How does it make a difference in our tracks? Compression helps control the dynamics of our tracks, meaning it tries to find a happy balance between the really loud parts of a recording and the really quiet parts of a recording. So with let's just do this. Okay, so to illustrate compression, without getting into a whole lot of details, let's just listen to a track without compression and then with compression. And we will pay attention to the volume meter and see where it kind of hangs out. So here's the vocal track without compression. And just, again, pay attention to this yellow bar. It'll be somewhere around here.
He sings a love song as we go along, walking in a winter wonderland.
Okay, so it went from, what is that, like -5 to about -15. So there's like a 10 decibel difference with just that part. The vocals were kind of all over the place with dynamics, which isn't a bad thing. In fact, you can see that here in the waves. This part peaks quite a bit, and it's quite a bit quieter than some of these other parts. So let's see what it sounds like when I turn on quite a bit of compression. And I'm sorry, I just said quite a bit of times.
He sings a love song as we go along, walking in a winter wonderland.
Okay, so the main peak was up to like, with compression, it was up to -9, and it went down. So it still hung around. Its range wasn't as big. It didn't get as loud, and it kind of hung around -12 for the majority of the time, instead of bouncing up and down like it did without compression. So that's essentially what compression is doing, is keeping the vocal track, in this case, at about the same volume the whole time, which I applied a lot of compression here, and you don't want to do that. In fact, the vocals sounded almost like the life was sucked out of them because there was a lot of compression there. But I just wanted to illustrate the point that compression is helping smooth out the tracks so there's not some bursts of loudness and then really quiet parts. Especially with vocals, compression will help bring out some of the quieter sounds like pronunciation, when you say F, or just really soft, not when you say F, but like when you say words that start with F. Anything that's just like really quiet, it makes those a little bit louder so you can hear the pronunciation a lot better. And as far as these parameters go, ratio is for every 5 decibels of volume from the recording, it's going to output it to 1 decibel. So it makes some parts significantly quieter. And threshold is basically saying at what point shall it start compressing. So if I've got it at like -20, just go over here to my graph, -20. So really anything above this little line here will start being compressed, which is quite a bit. So that's a really simple explanation of compression. I'm sure I've left some questions in your mind as to how it actually works, but that's it in a nutshell. And so we're doing that to our multi-track, to a lot of our tracks here, to help kind of smooth everything out so that they blend together just a little bit better. As far as the individual tracks go, it makes some tracks have a little bit more clarity. It pulls out some of the, like with singing, it pulls out some of the syllables and things that aren't as audible when it gets mixed in with all the other instruments. And again, just overall smoothness to the track, which is something that is quite desirable, and you do not want to overuse it. If you use too much compression, you're going to get a headache just listening to it because it really does suck the life out of it. But in moderation, compression is a very important tool, and it's literally used everywhere. You've got EQ, you've got compression, and then next on to reverb. These are the 3 that you are using all the time. Third and final effect is reverb. Now, the point of reverb, for the most part, is really just to help the tracks all feel like they were recorded at the same time in the same place. Just kind of make the instruments almost bleed together a little bit. Whereas if you're not using any reverb, say you've got a whole song that's got reverb and one track doesn't, it's really going to stand out. It's going to feel like, if the vocals, for example, it's going to feel like the person's standing right in front of your face, singing at your face, and the instrumentals are playing out of speakers in the background. So let's try that. I'm back at our completed version of the song, not the one that I was showing earlier. So this is the final version of the song. And let's hear those vocals the way that they are, and then I'm going to toggle the reverb on and off, and you're going to hear those vocals just come like way too present in your face. You know what I'm saying? So again, the reverb is on right now. Now I'm turning it off.
He sings a love song as we go along, walking in a winter wonderland.
See, it sounds good if that's the sound I was going for, but it is kind of a noticeable why don't you just sit back a little bit, Miss Vocal Singer person. It kind of, a good way to look at it is like a pop-up book. Reverb helps tame a pop-up book, and let me explain to you. So you open up a pop-up book and this like little thing pops out. Let's say it's a bird. You've got the rest of the page all nice and smooth back there, but that like pop-up flamingo is just like in your face. It might sound good. You've used EQ, you've used compression. The actual vocal track sounds good now. And in a lot of ways, it sits well with the songs on a frequency level and a smoothness level, but it is just too in your face. So we need to add some reverb to kind of flatten that bird back down a little bit, almost like ruffle its feathers and let the feathers kind of blend in with the background scenery. This is a really weird example, but seriously, that's like how my brain envisions reverb. So reverb is really, you do that to all of your tracks, you add just a little bit. You don't need to do so much that you can really hear the reverb. Let's just do this right now. I've got the vocal track. Let's add some reverb. I'm just going to play it and add enough so that you can barely hear that it's there, but not make it super present. So let's just play it without reverb and I'll slowly add it in.
Is the bluebird here to stay? Is the new bird?
See that? Like that, you can hear that pretty well. I don't want to hear it that much. I want to get it to that point where I can just barely start hearing it.
He sings a love song as we go along, walking in a winter wonderland.
See, it's not very much, but it's totally enough to help it just blend in better with the song.
Gone away
Whoops, let me turn that down for you.
is the bluebird here to stay.
Now turn it off.
Is the new bird. He sings a love song as we go along, walking in a winter.
It's super subtle, but it is noticeable. That's reverb. Mastering. What is mastering? So we've mixed all the songs, we've added the EQ, the compression, the reverb. Mastering is the final stage where you take the song as a whole and you apply effects to all the tracks as a whole. So let's have the song play in the background. I've got all these tracks routed to one master track. So any effects I apply to this master track will affect this as a whole. And I've got a plugin, it's called mastering. And I've got a couple of parameters and things that I can mess with here. So let's turn it off and hear the song, and then I'll turn it on. You can hear the difference that the effects that I've applied do. So no mastering right now. Now I'll turn it on.
It's a chillin', frolic and play, the Eskimo way, walking
Turn it on.
in a winter.
Okay, so what's going on here? Well, there's an EQ here, so to the entire song, I have turned down the frequencies at about whatever that is, 466 hertz. I've turned that down by a little bit. Just looking at the frequencies, that part was kind of spiking above the line, so I wanted to bring it down. I want to kind of keep all the frequencies as flat across the board as I can, so that when someone goes and listens to it on their booming stereo system in their car, it's not going to be way too bass heavy. If someone listens to it on their crappy earbud headphones, they're getting a flat frequency response back, so it's going to sound like whatever those headphones are supposed to make it sound like. So you want these frequencies to be pretty flat. I've added some reverb to the session as a whole, so it kind of blends even more so all the song or all the tracks. There's an exciter on here, which just kind of adds a little bit of excitement, some high end. I'll show you. Okay, I'll turn up the exciter and let you hear the difference.
Walking in a winter.
Oh. I definitely don't want like a ton of it on there, but I just add a little bit of that. And turning up loudness, it just kind of fills the song out a little bit more. You noticed that difference when I toggled the whole thing on and off. Loudness had a big part of that. It just makes it a little bit louder, and you can turn up the overall gain, essentially the volume of the whole song. So that is mastering 101 minus like 70, because I seriously did not go into too much detail with that. So anyway, I hope this video has been helpful. Thank you for sitting around and watching it. Again, I do plan on, in the near future, doing more videos like this, only I'm going to provide the instruments for you to download and mix yourself and watch the way that I did it. And again, hopefully you have questions at this point. You probably do. I think I've probably answered some of your questions and have raised more questions, which is a good thing. Please ask me in the comments below and I'll do my best to answer them. I've got videos coming out that'll explain EQ and these sort of things in a lot more detail for you. Until then, happy holidays, unless you're watching this video in like July or something. Thank you so much again, and adios.